All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am Pastor James Hein, lead pastor at St. Marcus Lutheran Church, and I am here with some of my friends and members from St. Marcus Church. Tonight we have Josh and Rebecca, if you'd give us a wave here real quick. And we have Chris and Brenda. Wave for us, thank you. And James and Megan. Thank you guys all so much for joining us tonight. This is the third part in a series of conversations that we've been doing throughout the summer, about one a month. And we've simply been calling them George Floyd, Advancing the Conversation as Christians. And I think the distinction about that is for us as believers, and especially as a body of believers, as a church, it's important that we relationally get to know one another to understand where each of us is coming from on such issues, like whether social injustice and otherwise. It's easy for the media to give its take on things, and we see a lot of talking heads and that sort of stuff. But really, unless those conversations are guided by the grace of Jesus Christ, and we express the patience and sensitivity and other focused love and grace and concern, it's hard for those conversations to be productive. And so my hope in the conversations was that we'd hold them as a church. And I would, whether we were recording these or not, I would want to have these conversations with members of our congregation. But I also thought other members of our congregation would probably benefit from hearing some of them. And for that matter, what kind of to my surprise that I found is a lot of people outside of our congregation have really enjoyed and benefited from the conversation as well. So if you're a member of St. Marcus, thanks for getting to know us a little bit better and participating in this conversation. If you're not part of St. Marcus, we appreciate you being here and listening into the wisdom from some of our members here. But where I want to start tonight is, first of all, I just want to acknowledge this is an obvious point, but the relevance of the discussion. I woke up this morning, and after I did my devotion, I opened my news feed, and the first thing that I saw as a cover story on Yahoo was the Jacob Blake situation down in Kenosha as the lead national story. And I'm guessing maybe all of you are already familiar with that, and I'm sure we're going to be finding out more about it in the upcoming days. But this is clearly an issue. It's clearly an issue really close to home, and all of us are experiencing this in a variety of different ways. And I'm sure this has been a conversation in each of your homes. And one of the really unique things, I think as a society, what you do is you look to people who have already figured something out if you want to learn. And when it comes to something like race relations or ethnic relations, probably the obvious place to start would be multiracial couples. And to be quite honest, I'm not even sure if that's the right term. I don't like using the word race all that much. From a biblical perspective, I think my belief is shaped by the fact that God created one human race. And really after the fall, we're told about two races, the sons of the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman. In other words, believers and unbelievers. So there's essentially like two races of humanity. And so the idea of basing race on something like ethnic heritage or skin color or something like that, I don't believe is a super biblical worldview. However, I also acknowledge that's the world in which we find ourselves today, and that's the language that people use today. And so for lack of a better term, something like multi-ethnic or multiracial couple is maybe the term that people would be familiar with. And just to shape our understanding of where our world is at on that, including the Christians in our world, I wanted to share with you just a quick excerpt from a book that I read about a year ago. It's gotten really popular in the last 3 or 4 months, but it's by a historian named Jamar Tisby. It's called The Color of Compromise. And he's got a section on it's called Organizing the Religious Right. And he's basically saying how the church has not always been awesome in leading race relations in our country, but actually been complicit in some of the racism that's been perceived in our country. And one example that he cites on page 164 is the, without wanting to publicly damage the image of an institution, nonetheless, this is public information, so I want to share it here. He says the university, Bob Jones University, a Christian university in the South, did finally admit its first black students in 1971, but they were only allowed if they were married. The age-old bugaboo of interracial marriage and miscegenation made the idea of having single black men on campus as potential suitors for young white ladies an unconscionable prospect for leaders at Bob Jones University. In 1975, the school changed its policy and allowed unmarried black students to enroll, but as clearly outlined in the student handbook, the school prohibited interracial dating. Bob Jones III, who served as president from 71 to 2005, stated in an interview, "There are three basic races." This is what he said: Oriental, Caucasian, and Negroid. At Bob Jones University, everybody dates within these basic three races. Anyone involved in an interracial relationship or those who promoted such pairings would face expulsion. The Civil Rights Act and the IRS's newly adopted policies meant that Bob Jones University's stance on interracial dating placed in it violation of racial discrimination laws. The IRS revoked the school's tax-exempt status in 1976, but these financial penalties did not deter university officials. They sued the IRS and presented their case as an issue of religious freedom. Even if this were discrimination, which it is not, though the government disagrees, Jones III said, it is a sincere religious belief founded on what we think the Bible teaches, no matter whether anyone else believes it or not. Similar to what some proponents of slavery had argued in the Civil War era, segregationists in the 20th century considered it a quote-unquote right to separate people based on race. It was a religious belief which the government had no right to interfere. This is Jamar Tisby speaking now. Even as recently as 1998, Jonathan Pate, a spokesperson for the university, explained, God has made people different from one another and intends those differences to remain. Bob Jones University is opposed to intermarriage of the races because it breaks down the barriers God has established. End quote. That is a quote from a spokesperson at the university in 1998. I was blown away to realize that that is an official stance of a Christian university that is pretty well known in the South as recently as 1998. Now, admittedly, about 10 years later, I think it was 2008, the university came out and apologized for that prior stance. But it's shocking to me. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school in 1998. The idea that that was a firmly held belief by, like, as an official stance by a Christian university just suggests to me that not all, but some Christian institutions have not been helping this cause, but hurting this cause for a long time. I'm hopeful that that might change, but I don't know. And so what I want to do is get your guys' take here tonight as people who I look to as leaders, people who have figured out stuff that a lot of us still haven't, you know? So with that said, why don't we start? The question that I've been asking each of the participants in prior conversations is simply, you know, what we saw back at the end of May was just kind of historically unique. And it was not unique in the sense that it was able to be captured by videos that everybody has on them now because we're all carrying smartphones. Not unique in the sense that nobody believes it hasn't happened before, but actually that we're becoming more aware of the things that have been happening because everything can be recorded. If you watched the video from the George Floyd tragedy, what was your take on that? What was your initial reaction? Anything you felt, anything you experienced, conversations you had, anything? Does anybody want to comment on that to get us started?
I think I'll be honest. I have not watched the whole thing simply because I can't handle it. It was something that I saw, on the news right away, and I think at most I've seen, maybe like a minute of it. And Rebecca just put it just perfectly. She just said, when you watch it, it's just pure evil. It just makes my heart so sad. It brings all the negative feelings out in my soul and in my mind, sadness, anger. And just for those reasons, I didn't want to watch the whole thing. I know a lot of people said I made myself watch it, and I just couldn't bear to do it. It was just too heartbreaking to do.
Yeah, I struggled for a while, for a couple of days, actually deciding whether or not I was actually going to watch it. And I mustered the courage to sit down and watch it. And I felt sick. I felt sick. I felt like, just like Josh said, that I was witnessing pure evil. And there was even a moment where I felt like I was going crazy. You know, you have all these emotions that you're feeling. You're angry, you're upset, you're hurt, you're confused. And I felt like I was going crazy. And I even like shut myself in the room for a while. I didn't talk to Josh. I didn't talk to the kids. I just had to work through my own emotions to see, one, that this would happen to this man, and two, that this would happen this time and age, and that so many people, even now, it's crazy. I'm getting emotional again. So I'll just leave it there.
For me, I'm pretty disengaged person. Like, I'm not on social media. Only check my phone for like texts and phone calls. So a friend of mine kind of sent me the video right away, and I just kind of put it off for about 3 or 4 days, and it just kept gaining media attention. It was brought up at my place of work, and I finally watched it, and I just felt anger right away within the first couple seconds. Just being in law enforcement, seeing the tactics that cop used, we were never taught to do something like that. And I immediately just thought murder, and just was very upset after watching that video. And I know that other people feel the same way throughout law enforcement. And I mean,
yeah,
it was just very upsetting. It took me a while to just kind of come down and just kind of think about stuff after that.
For those at home who don't know, James mentioned he's in law enforcement. And so this really unique position as a Black man in law enforcement, hearing things from multiple angles, I think is such an interesting perspective, James. And it's interesting, even to hear you say, yeah, what I saw going on is not the way that situation should have been handled, no matter who the individual is, kind of thing, is interesting. Anybody else, Brenda or Chris, did you get a chance did you watch the video? Did you choose not to watch the video?
I'm kind of like Josh. I saw parts of it, but I didn't watch the whole thing. You know, things where I heard about it, I saw some of it based on just happened to click to see what it was, but then I just didn't finish watching it because I knew what the result was. So I didn't want to watch it. But I know my initial reaction seeing it was just, when I'm seeing it happen, I know people are recording it. My initial reaction is like, why is anyone jumping in to help out?
Yeah.
Because that's just the way I am. Like, I would be like, I guess I'm not there because I don't understand the situation, but my initial reaction was like, why wouldn't someone, I don't care a cop or not, jump on him and do something?
Yeah.
But I understand that's not the reality of how it can work. But it was, so.
Yeah, I only watched pieces of it. Just the story in and of itself is heartbreaking. Even just hearing the responses now and just reliving that, just that time, which wasn't that long ago, it's just heartbreaking. So I watched very few pieces, but just hearing the emotional responses of others, I get it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's not strong enough.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel. I did watch the whole thing, in part because I think I was in denial for the first piece of it. Like, I couldn't believe it was before it was reported of like, here's exactly what happened or whatever. I saw it pretty early on some Twitter, one of the early Twitter feeds. And it was like the stages of grief: the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That first, like, I couldn't actually fathom. It's one of those things that you've been so conditioned through media to see violence, to see whatever, to see, like, you almost think you become desensitized to it. But there was this moment of reality that was unlike anything I've ever felt in watching something before. So yeah, that has been an interesting response that I've heard from people. Once I knew it was out, once I knew what happened, I just chose not to watch it. And I totally get that now. There's a part of me that wishes I hadn't seen it too.
Yeah.
So, Would you guys mind sharing? So again, going back to the portion that I read a couple minutes ago about how it's interesting to me to think as many of the couples that I know who are, again, and you can correct me on if there's a better term, multiracial or biracial couple or multi-ethnic couple. Is that how you guys would self-identify? Would you use a different term?
Yeah, it really mattered to us.
We call ourselves Jershins because Josh is German and I'm Haitian by ethnicity, so we're the Jershins couple.
You might be one of that might be like unique to you. Like we're all unique in God's eyes, but that's truly unique. Did anybody in growing up or your background, did anybody question anything along the way or make assumptions or make comments that you thought, okay, that's unfair or that's hurtful, or I know you don't mean it like that? Because I think that's a lot of somebody, when I got to Milwaukee, somebody introduced me to the term, they called it non-malicious racism, which, like all racism is hurtful, but what they meant is non-intentionally hurtful. Like the person isn't trying to say something hurtful, but we've all been in that spot where somebody says something to us that really hurts us, whether they were meaning to or not. Is there anything like from people in your lives along the way that they just didn't understand the concept of a multiracial couple?
I would say so. We were talking about this not too long ago. So one of our family members, I think this was shortly after we got married, said, I really don't like Black people until I met you. And it doesn't live around here, lives in a predominantly white area. Association with Black people is what they see on the news or TV. And so I come along and it's, yeah, you're cool for a Black person, or, didn't like Black people. And positive intent, right? Meant well, had no intention of being offensive. It was just a matter of ignorance, for a lack of a better word. And so we've seen a couple of those, but not too much.
Yeah. For the most part, whenever we've seen anything negative, it's pretty much turned positive. Anyone that had a negative viewpoint at first has a positive viewpoint of it. I can't think of anyone where it's like, no, they still just can't. They don't get it. With it. Yeah.
It's a great educational an opportunity to sit down and inform, and to help people understand that words matter. Yep. Even with positive intent, your word choice matters, and here's how it impacts other people. And it's a conversation. So
it's really interesting, Brenda, to hear you say that somebody would say they had an opinion without actually knowing maybe a Black person. They had like the idea of not actually having a relationship with somebody and yet already having an opinion of them. Yeah. Is fascinating. It shows the fallenness of the sinful nature that we would devalue someone or something before we even know it personally. That's just whatever opinion we've based on what we saw wherever on TV or movies or whatever. Did you guys meet in school? Did you meet at work?
All right, there we go. Me and Brenda? Or
us two?
Yeah. Did you guys?
Oh my gosh, we have this super romantic story. We met in a nightclub.
Yes. The old-fashioned way.
Hanging out with friends in college, dancing the night away at a club.
That is romantic. Yes, stay out of nightclubs. Those are the super spreaders right now. Clubs and churches are the number one place for transmission, I supposedly. So. Josh and Rebecca, what about you guys? Have you guys had any, first of all, where did you guys meet? And have you had any experiences?
So ours was super romantic, very textbook. We met online about 10 years ago. And God was just woven in it the whole entire way, which was awesome. And we kind of collided from two different worlds because I'm from Illinois. He's from Milwaukee, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different races, obviously. So, yeah.
Awesome. What has your experience been as a multiracial couple? Has people been supportive? Have people been said foolish things?
I think for the most part, people have been supported. It's funny, we were kind of talking to each other before we were doing this, and I was like, did you tell your parents I was Black before like I came and met them? Like, how did that conversation go? And he's like, well, did you tell your parents I was white? And I think we both showed pictures of each other. But it's
we never like made mention, like,
right.
Oh, I met a girl, she's Black, or it just kind of, because I think for both of us, it was just like, and quite honestly, I think our families have been, amazing. They've been completely supportive. We've been raised in Christian families who've been taught to love each other as Christ loved first. And so there was a lot of real positive reception when my family first met her, and when I met her family. It's just been a blessing.
Yeah, I think any of the obstacles that we may have encountered were outside of our families. For instance, I'm a teacher, and I've experienced when families or students find out that I'm married to a white man, usually there's kind of they're taken aback, like, really? Or when they see my children and they see that my children are biracial, a lot of times there's an eyebrow raised. I remember right before we got married, a friend of our family kind of brought up the question, well, how are you going to raise your children? How is he going to be able to take care of your Black children? And so that was a very, very hard hitting and offensive. I'm sure they had great intentions, but he's going to take care and love my children just like any dad would.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Thanks. James. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say one thing that I've been noticing a lot more in light of all the recent the recent events is I feel like a lot more people when we go out to the stores, there's a lot of positive reception to it. Like, people will stop, and I felt like that people looking at us and like, old little old ladies like stopping and smiling at the family as their kids run up and down the aisles. And I feel like just being together is a positive testimony to the chaos in the world. So it's really a cool thing to actively just live unity every day without really even trying. Quite honestly.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. It does, like, it's a subtle message without even saying it. I think the rest of the world will look at your families and say, okay, whatever we don't know as a society, it's like you own some kind of secret that the rest of us aren't in on. And we we need to learn for the benefit of society, but like, we don't totally know it yet. And I feel the same way, honestly, about churches. Dr. King said that 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings is the most segregated hour in America. Mm-hmm. And I think when the rest of the society looks at, like, quote unquote, white churches or Black churches, it's kind of like, you guys aren't helping solve the problem. You're maybe kind of contributing to the problem. And I don't know exactly, I don't pretend to have, answers on this or anything like that. And I'm certainly not saying I'm good at it, but I think very clearly I do get the impression that when I look at churches that are good at fostering multicultural environments, when I look at families that are multi-ethnic, I do feel like, okay, you guys have some kind of special ingredient or some secret that I don't yet fully know or understand, but I need to, kind of learn that. But I think, we're kind of looking to families as yours to be leaders in moments like this. And everybody, I don't know if our country's ever been more willing to follow the lead of people who have some of that stuff figured out. James and Megan, you want to share with us how you guys met and any experiences you've had?
Yeah, so we are a little cliche. We met freshman year of high school and grew up in Milwaukee and started dating senior year. Got married right after college. And we were both really blessed. Our parents were really open to it, never really got any negativity towards that. I think just one, assumption really sticks out in my mind. We went to high school together, obviously. So we were back there and somebody came up to me and was like, wow, like this, like your marriage wouldn't have been possible without the choice program. And while I am a proponent of the choice program, I had to look at this faculty member and say, which one of us are you assuming was choice?
Sure.
And that kind of stopped them, and to think like that was a huge bias and a completely incorrect bias at that. And so just thinking about what other biases people might have towards us, or just assumptions. So it really actually was eye-opening to me. And I probably needed that to think through what people were possibly thinking in their own head, but not saying out loud. It's just that somebody had said that. That's like the biggest thing that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah, that's a great example. I can fully see lots of people making a statement like that. Again, going back to that not intentionally malicious thing, but like very clearly you're putting people into categories unfairly and unnecessarily and unhelpfully by doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, like Megan said, our families both handle it pretty well. My family grew up in the South in Mississippi, and both of my parents are in their 60s, so segregation was prevalent growing up with them, and both of my grandparents were maids to like rich white families too. So it was just, some of my family had a little racial tension when we first started dating, but immediate family, my parents, my grandparents, they were very welcoming, and I mean, I'm really grateful that by that. I think the one negative story I've had was a few years ago. I picked my nephew up from school, and his teacher was basically like, "What are you doing? Why are you here? You can't take him."
It was my sister's son.
Yeah, it's her sister son, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm his uncle. I'm here to pick him up. Like, what's the big deal?" And that that was like the first time it actually hit me, that because I don't think I've like really ever noticed color with Megan. I mean, I've dated her. We've known each other since freshman year of high school and dated each other for years. So it just, I guess you just never know what's going through other people's mind. So yeah, it really hit me by that. Other than that, we've had positive experiences.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
Something that James said, I just was curious about everyone else. You said that you never like thought of color with Megan, and I've always felt the same way with Josh. Like, it's never been like, hey, you're white, I'm black. Like, it's never been like that. I feel like the recent events have really brought that to the surface and have made us more aware, where we've had to have some, I think, difficult conversations that we didn't necessarily need to have before. And I was just curious about you guys, maybe Brenda, if you guys experienced that.
I'll say, lately, I mean, sometimes I don't even want to say how I feel about something, or vice versa, because I don't want to argue. You know, like, it's kind of, and it was never there before. And all of a sudden, like, really? Like, I have to, in my own home, I can't just say, you know, like, it's not, no one's right or wrong. It's just a matter of opinion. And then someone has an opinion, someone has a different one. And it's, I don't know. It's
been interesting.
Yeah.
I think that part of it comes from like in the media and stuff, how they're, so like he said, I never saw Megan as that. Like, I think that a lot of people are saying that people are suppressing the black side, and whitewashing things. And I think that just being mindful that we're being aware of the cultures that we're teaching to our kids, and making sure that we're teaching both and those kind of things. And I think sometimes that message gets skewed in perception. So just making sure that we are doing both and not just sticking to one or just seeing one. But I totally hear what you're saying, because people have been very forward about that lately. And so just being mindful of the way we're wording it, but that both sides are coming together.
Yeah.
So you brought up what you teach kids, and all of you are parents, and a number of you are involved in education. And what do you and what will you teach kids, your own kids, about ethnic relations?
So, I mean, our kids, they kind of get the best of all worlds, right? So they spend a lot of time with my family, a lot of time with Chris's family. They have cousins that are interracial. They're world travelers with us. And so they've really had an opportunity to see how other people live and just respect cultures in general, and celebrate those differences. So they never really, I don't think, and they're only 8 and 9, but I don't think they saw different skin color as something that needed to be discussed. Yeah. And then we saw protests going down our main street. We live probably, 5 or 6 blocks from the mayor, and there were some protests going down, and they saw it firsthand. And that was really when I had to sit down and fully explain, like, here's what's going on, and here's why this matters. And I think what we're just telling them is, well, even up until now, like, I get our kids books, and I don't know about you guys, but it's hard to find books with mixed kids represented in them. So I would have to specifically seek out those books so that they understand you belong, right? You have a place here. Everyone is different. Everyone's going to look different. And I know every movie you see is going to have a certain representation of a look. And every book you read is going to have a certain representation of a look. But that's just those things. It's not like who individual people are. And so just to love people for who they are, look at their heart, exemplify Christ, and just show love, grace, and forgiveness. And I think our daughter has picked that up really well. Our son is still, he just thinks everyone's a triclod. And so that's.
Yeah. Brenda, to kind of piggyback on what you said, here in our house, the priority for Rebecca and I is always to try to teach our kids about the love of Jesus Christ and the grace that he showed us. Mm-hmm. And we try to teach our kids the command that he shared with us, love each other as I have loved you. And so I think, we do notice things like skin color, but they don't matter. Like, they're to be celebrated. Like, January 1st is New Year's, but it's also Haitian Independence Day. So we go down and we celebrate, something that I'm like, hey, another reason to have a party. Awesome. And then we do our, we tell the kids, hey, another reason to celebrate. And, in October, we celebrate Oktoberfest. Hey, great time to be a German. And so the kids, but one thing we can always tell the kids is, people in the world might not accept you, but Jesus always accepts you. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what you look like. Heaven is a place where there's lots of different races, people from every tribe, nation, and tongue. And we're going to teach our kids that. We're going to continue to teach our kids that. And, it works clearly.
Yeah. Our kids are still pretty young. Our intention was never, I don't think we ever said, we're going to sit down and have a conversation with our kids and say, well, mom's black, dad's white, and together we make biracial children. Our intention was not to have a conversation like that, but our son came home one day from school and said, a friend wouldn't play with me today because he said, we're not the same color. Oh. And so then that caused us to sit down and have a conversation. I'm like, well, what color do you think you are? And in his mind, I don't think he had ever really thought about it. So he kind of looked at Josh and he kind of looked at me and he's like, I think I'm the same color as dad. But he didn't really know. And so we had to sit down. We raised both of our arms. We put them together and he said, you're a blend of both of us. And it's beautiful. And you should, if your friend says he doesn't like you because of your color, say that I'm great and just keep on moving.
Just find someone
else to play with. And we just think, especially with the racial climate right now, we really want to instill in our children to not let themselves be judged by others and to stand confident on the fact that, just like Josh shared, that they are children of God, no matter what anybody says, and to have confidence in that.
Excellent. Yeah, I think for your kids, it's almost one of those things like moving forward, they're going to be leaders in society in some way, kind of whether they like it or not, because they're going to grow up in an environment that they already get. A couple different backgrounds, but not everybody's growing up in that environment. And when they meet other people, I think there's going to be a temptation to, almost kind of self-righteously look down on everybody else that hasn't had that experience, because your kids are going to be a couple steps ahead of where a lot of other kids are in that regard, and they're going to have to be leaders. But you know what I mean? Okay. Any other thoughts on things that you would share with kids, intentionally or specifically? If not, the next question I had was, and this might require a little bit of explanation, but are there any, now that you're married to a spouse of a different ethnic background, is there anything that other people now say that maybe irritates you or bugs you or you're alerted to in a way that you wouldn't have been before? And an example I gave to you guys prior was that, like, so when my wife married a pastor, and unfortunately for her, she's got to deal with the baggage that comes with that. But whenever she sees, like, one of her favorite shows is Law and Order or SVU, and whenever clergy is on Law and Order or SVU, it's not good. It does, like, it's not. They don't prop up the benefit of clergy, and so she has to deal with that kind of stereotype, and it's a little bit like gets under her skin a little, Is there anything for you that has, or maybe a better example, you guys all know Ron Kelly, right? One of our members, and pastoral assistant, and good friend. And honestly, he's one of the purest hearted guys I know I've ever met. Mm-hmm. And after he had initially told me the story about serving as a realtor and going to a house, and he was doing an open house kind of thing, but then one of the neighbors called the cops on him, thinking that he was breaking into that house. The only thing they knew about him was his skin color, and they thought he was breaking into the house. They didn't assume he was a realtor. They assumed he was, like, burglaring the house. And I just felt so angry on the inside, because it wasn't like something that I read in the newspaper or saw on the news or anything like that. It was somebody I personally cared about, who was negatively impacted by a bias and prejudice. And it was like a visceral reaction. I'm just curious if you guys have had anything like that regarding your spouse. Because it's one thing if it's us and people make assumptions about us and whatever, but when it's about somebody that you love dearly, it's almost even more real and more painful. Is there anything that you've become alerted to or sensitive to that you'd like people to know about, that when other people say this, it bothers me because, this or this?
Well, I don't know if I'm sensitive to it, but I definitely roll my eyes when people automatically assume he's rich because he's white. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me? Or it's funny, like, I'll have folks that I know, associates or friends, dare I say, they'll be like, oh my gosh, he bought you that car, or look at him. And I'm like, oh, poor little me, like, just sitting over here being taken care of by Prince Charming, which is fine, and I am, but just the assumption of it all rolls my eyes.
Yes.
It's
interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say that anybody's actively doing this, towards Rebecca. I haven't necessarily actively seen anyone do this to her, but kind of recent events have made me keenly aware of her kind of almost constantly trying to disprove people wherever she goes, wherever we go, where it's not something I ever think about or have ever thought about. But again, the events have kind of pushed us into having conversations and to realize that people, sometimes I don't even notice how people are looking at her. But then, her telling me, I'm trying to always disprove people and what they think about people like me. And that that really made me keenly aware of now how people talk and look at her and what, and trying to figure out what they think about her. But it also broke my heart. And I, they're just, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what to do. All I can know is no, and just love her. And sometimes there's nothing I can do, but just be aware of it and continue to love her as best I can. But that was something that I just learned that she's had to live with for a long time.
I think on the other side too, something that I kind of became aware of is Josh and I both are educators, and there have been times when maybe it was assumed that he made a certain decision because he's white and the other person is black. And so seeing that sometimes even when he is just making a decision purely based on fact, there's always going to be this assumption that he's doing it because he's white. Mm-hmm. And there have been a couple times where I'm like, fine, if they want to sit, they can sit me, you, and your black wife. We can sit down and talk about how you were racist with what you did. But yeah, so I've definitely become aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
For me, I think it's interesting. Like if a situation happens toward him, a racial situation, I sometimes feel more upset than he acts. I don't know, maybe inside he's still feeling upset. Because not that, I mean, it's a sad reality that he's more used to that. And then when I see it, I'm more like outraged. So like, even at work, he's gotten the police called on him when he's at work. And so he's in uniform and there's a suspicious black male. And that story just like makes me so upset because he's trying to help. So those stories outrage me more almost than him because he's learned to brush it off, which is sad.
Yeah, I've been at work a couple times. I work for a department in the North Shore area, which is like predominantly white, the area I work for. So I've been at calls at night where I've seen someone's garage door open, and we usually just knock on the door, just let them know like, hey, your garage door is open. There's increase of crime, and people just let me stay at their door without coming there, and they shine their light at me like, hey, who are you? So I have to like flash my badge at them, like show them my SWAT car. Still don't believe I'm a cop. I've been on bike patrol before late at night, and someone called the cops on me, said there was a suspicious black male on a bicycle trying to break into my vehicle, which I was nowhere even close to their vehicle. And it's a ton of stories. But thinking about Megan, whenever there's been situations where I've told people where she worked, like, hey, she works near First and North Avenue at St. Marcus Lutheran School. And I've heard comments like, oh, how does she do teaching black kids? It's just like, definitely rubs me the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So like any time that has come up, how she disciplines our child, or how there's just this thing where white people discipline their childs differently than I would, or whatever. We make decisions mutually, just like how she's going to love and discipline and take care of our child just like I would. Just kind of touching back on what you guys said earlier. So those are the things that bother me a lot.
How do you, and this could be anybody, but James, as you're talking about somebody, again, calling the cops on a police officer is just the most insane kind of thought. But how do you not become consumed by bitterness in the midst of something like that? It seems like it'd be so easy, like even if you don't like directly address it or talk about it, and it just kind of sits under the surface, and I would think piles up as time goes. How do you process that kind of stuff?
For me, I kind of sit down and talk with Megan afterwards, or close friends, because I know that it angers me, and they're doing it for me to show my emotion and become angry and do something. So they're trying to get that reaction out of me. So I try my best not to feed to them what they want out of me. So I mean, it happens a lot being a police officer. I mean, especially now, in this what we're living in now. I drive around, I get middle fingers from people. People roll their window down and just curse me out all the time. And I mean, it's definitely hard, but you just kind of look at the greater scale of things. Of why did you want to become a police officer? You want to serve your community. You want to make a difference. You want to, love everyone like they should be loved and treated. And so I just kind of look at the positives and try to look away from the negatives, even though it's definitely difficult to do each day. So,
and I think too, while it might, like, he was called like a traitor for being a Black police officer. So I think when people need to recognize too, like, you can change from the inside out. So just him having those tough conversations with other officers, and even us, like with family members or whoever we said didn't totally agree, just having those tough conversations and just pointing out biases that they might not even like inherently realize, like in a calm, loving way, speaking the truth in love. So
yeah, that it's become like, as the longer I'm a pastor, the more I'm kind of looking for this now. And I feel like the idea of creating transformation in somebody else's life usually requires a cross in our lives. So like in the same way that Christ dies for our sins, and that transforms us from enemies of God to God's children and God's family, so this gracious act on behalf of one leads to transformation in the lives of another. I think whether you're a teacher or a police officer or a multiracial couple who is dealing with assumptions and prejudices from a surrounding community or family or whomever, it requires a little bit of a cross, like bearing like that pain. But like if God isn't going to use you to help minister to that person, that family member, that family, that whatever, that person in the community, like he's using you to be that cross bearer and that Christ-like individual in those other people's lives to create, gracious acts that create transformation in their lives. And so it's one of those things, like, is it a burden? Yeah. Is it a responsibility? Yeah. But, I can see in your guys' lives and in your stories, it's so obvious to me how God is using you to touch the community and to transform people out, to get them to repent of their prejudices, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And I guess that would be one of my final questions here is, in your view, how does Christianity, and by that, I mean just in general, the good news that God loved us in the person of Jesus Christ, loved us undeservedly, how does that offer a resource to deal with some things that are referred to as social issues or political issues at times, but really they're sin issues, right? Things like racism and social injustice and the need for forgiveness. And how does Christianity and the grace of Jesus uniquely empower you to empower us to deal with these types of issues?
I think that our sinful nature, I think, makes us want to respond with anger, makes us want to respond in a negative way. Something that's really helped me is recognizing the evil and recognizing that this is a result of evil. This is a result of Satan running rapid, and recognizing that Jesus is the answer to all of this. And by me showing love and by me showing forgiveness and compassion, doing all those things, showing the image of Jesus Christ to other people, for me, that's the answer. For me, that's how I cope.
Excellent.
And I think to go with that, just, it's God offering that hand of reconciliation to us. Everybody has struggled with the fallout of the recent events, and God still just holds out his hand of forgiveness. And no matter what we've thought, said, or done, he can wipe the slate clean, and we can live under his grace from this point forward. And, it's just a beautiful thing. So even where I've made mistakes, in our relationship and things like that, Jesus has forgiven us. And so obviously that's the fix for our world's problems right now. But Satan's running rampant, and he's going to get in the way of God's grace getting out to everybody. So all we can do is just live it every single day and preach it every single day as best we can, and spread the gospel to the best of our ability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times we picture Jesus as like the loving shepherd, and he totally is that, but also like he turned over the tables in the temple. So just being willing to like call people out for the greater good, and just being willing to show that love in a different way and help them realize like this is a problem, but now we have to move forward and fix it. So.
Excellent.
I mean, for me, I think it's been a lot difficult. I know that that Jesus' grace is out there, and I mean, he loves, and he is not blinded by this. He knows exactly what's going on. But just me constantly seeing all the negatives that take place at work, 24/7, whenever I'm at work, and I think it just kind of blinds all the positive stuff. And I mean, even though I know that Jesus is with me, and he is graceful, and he loves me, and he loves everything that everyone, with regardless of political spectrums or how they feel about whatever. I just think it's been very difficult for me to love like I should, and be that good shepherd and speak with people, which I hope something turns around for that, but kind of push myself. But it's just been very difficult time for me, just being honest.
Yeah, just seeking that out, that love out, and ensuring that he's always coming back to that.
Thank you for admitting that, James. I can't imagine anybody who's in a more tense position right now, to be perfectly honest. A Black law enforcement officer in serving a largely white community, and like of all possible directions to be pulled in at the exact same time. That's just got to be a crazy stirring of emotions and feelings about all that. So.
Yeah. Sorry, my mind is just turning. It's hard for me to get everything out, but yeah, it's been a very difficult time, and for not only me serving my community, but whenever a riot or anything takes place, then I'm usually sent there because I'm on this specialized team. So
yeah,
just kind of dealing with people yelling at you and all of this stuff, which I mean, I'm not oblivious at all. I think change needs to take place, especially in law enforcement, between citizens, and but I believe tearing down that divide is going to happen through God. And he's just getting the message out there, and just showing people that you love and care for them, especially when law enforcement just treat people as they should be treated, and just treat everyone as they should be treated. It's the message, that the ultimate message, and that should be out there.
Yeah, I appreciate you each saying that too. And that's, I mean, maybe I sometimes say things as a pastor that I think I like, probably kind of cliche, but it's also like the right thing to say. And the idea that, like, as we're advancing the conversation as Christians, the idea that everybody here is acknowledging, okay, so like racism isn't going to go away by getting the right person into office. It's not a political, checkbox kind of thing. Like, can those things ever help? Yeah, but ultimately, it's a sin and grace issue, and each of us as Christians starts with the sin that exists in ourselves, and we try to, again, kind of bear that cross in our community, and hope that God, the gospel and the good news of what Jesus has done to us, works change and spreads out from there. But that's, again, I think you guys are living that and showing that in just kind of a beautiful way right now. But I also know that it's like a burden to carry. And, I think Christ is going to, like, through our suffering, he says, number one, you don't have to do it alone. Number two, there's meaning and purpose and ministry that happens through it. And number three, he ultimately suffered so that one day our suffering comes to an end. And the idea of looking forward to that time, like, it will get better in the long run, because God promises that church of multiple nations and languages and colors and all that stuff in Revelation. Brenda and Chris, did you have anything on as far as how Christian teaching shapes how it addresses these kind of social ills?
I think, we've been showing grace. I don't know we mentioned this before, but we've been showing grace, so grace we need to give to others. So, I guess in our situation, there's a lot of scenarios where we can show grace. So we're given a lot more opportunities to do so. And honestly, when people have like a negative attitude or they just don't know, like, I feel sorry for them, because I'm like, if you're if you're black or white, you think that's the only way to live, or that's all you know, like, you're missing out on a lot. And I feel sorry for them because they just don't, like, there's a lot they're missing out on because they're just not open to it. And I don't really get mad at them. I feel sorry for them. And try to educate them. Pray for them.
Yeah.
But
yeah, just try really hard not to take it personally. Just kind of echoing the group here. We're all sinful, right? And there are sinful human beings out there. And the devil is working hard in some people. And just praying for them, showing forgiveness, showing grace. And James, I think you said it well, just not letting it, like, they want an emotional response. And, I have to tell myself sometimes, why am I worried when I know God's got this? And it's a hard thing to separate, you shouldn't be worried because he's going to take care of it. But just keeping that in your mind and, getting home, having conversations with Chris, praying for folks, and just remembering we were loved first. So, pray for people.
Yeah, keep them with the playbook, like the sermon from last Saturday.
That is a great place, Brenda. That's a great sentiment. And Josh, would you mind closing us out with a prayer tonight?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Pray. Dear Jesus, thank you so much just for bringing us here together to be able to boldly have these conversations, just covered by your grace, covered by your blood as your saved children. Father, just help us, give us courage and strength as we go our separate ways to live that grace boldly wherever we're assigned by you to go. Keep us safe. And Father God, we just pray that your message of the gospel would just break through the divisions and destroy the divisions that are being built up in this world by the devil. Make your gospel powerful. Make it change the world, Father. And just, we're so humbled that you decided to use us to share that powerful gospel. Father, to you be the glory. In your name we pray together. And all God's people said, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Josh. And thank you all so much tonight I know it's after putting the little ones down and making time here at the end of the day, but I am just so grateful for all you guys and your beautiful families and your willingness to be leaders. I learned so much from these conversations. I learned from you guys, and I have so much more to learn, but you guys are absolutely leading the way and glorifying God in the process. So I'm just super thankful for you. But
thanks for asking us to do it. It's cool to be able to do it.
Yes, we'll keep the conversation going and continue to appreciate having you guys on the front leading us in all that. Okay, so God bless. You guys all have a wonderful night. And for those of you who are at home, what we've been reminding ourselves from Scripture with each of these conversations is to continue to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Have a wonderful night, and God bless.
Night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.